Hey everyone, it's Liz. So this is the quick guide for modeling a signet ring. So if you would like the full walkthrough, which is more real-time, the demo modeling process, I would recommend that you watch the recorded live stream. This is going to be more like just the steps. So we're going to go through it very quickly with much less sort of commentary. So that being said, let's jump right in. So, how we are going to model this. So, this is going to be very distinctly different than the last classes that I've taught in that this ring is a lot. It's pretty simple. There's not that many shapes and not that many steps, but it's going to be a lot of orienting objects without doing like setting everything up and then at the very end finishing all fairly rapidly. So it's going to kind of feel like it's not coming together and then suddenly it comes together. So really there's not too much to say except that we're going to be building all of this sort of at the same time. And then the very last thing we'll do is I'll show you a couple different options to get that engraving or raised detail depending on what your preferences are. So, jumping right in. As I said, this will be a quick guide. So, feel free just to pause this video as you need to kind of catch up, but this is like the rapid fire version. So, Signet Ring quick guide. Okay. So, jumping right in. So, the first thing that you're going to need to do is add a cylinder hole to the work plane. And as soon as you do that, you're going to immediately rotate it 90 degrees and increase the number of sides to 64. And what that does is give us this nice smooth edge versus when it's much lower, it's more of a faceted sort of sharp edge. So just increase that to 64. And then we're going to resize this. So we are going to be sizing this to follow your ring size. So in my case, I'm a ring size 6, and that's 16.5 millimeters. If you don't know the millimeter conversion of your ring size, it's in the description of this video. So you can definitely check that out and pause here and just exit out. But otherwise, feel free to follow along with a size 16.5 a size 6. So we're resizing this to 16.5 and 16.5. And then we want to actually, oops, that was wrong. This is the 16.5. And then we actually want to change the thickness to be really whatever you would like it to be, but let me show you what we're doing. So I'm going to go with 3. And so what this is right now is this is essentially going to act for the most of the class, this is going to act as a guide for us to build everything around it. So this is going to be us referring to what the size of our ring is, meaning the cutout for the finger is going to be this object. So you have the option of being flexible and changing as you go what this thickness is, but this will right now is a guide. So think about like how thick you want like the bottom under the finger, the bottom of the ring shank to be, and then somewhat on the sides as well, because that's what we're defining right now, 3 millimeters. Okay. So yours could be 2, it could be 5. If you do go more than about 4 or 5, be aware that your ring size likely needs to increase. The thicker the band, the higher the ring size you would wear. Okay, so we are now going to add a sphere to the work plane, kind of like overlapping it, and we're going to change that to be a hole so that you can still see both objects. So I'm just going to kind of move this a little bit more overlapping. So this sphere, and this is where it starts to like get a little more complex in that we are not going to see this ring really coming together until the very end. So you have to kind of just trust the process right now. But this sphere needs to be resized. And the size that you're going to use is going to be what you would want your outer dimension to be of your ring band. So we know that for a size 6, my inner dimension is 16.5, right? 16.5. So at this point, I have to say to myself, what do I want my thicknesses to be on either side? So I think I'm going to go with 2.5. So that would be 16.5 ring size add 2.5 to one side, add 2.5 to the other side, so a total of 5 millimeters. So I am resizing this sphere to be 21.5, which is 16.5 plus 5. So whatever yours is, you'll need to decide what that is for you. And only really the front, sorry, the front and top dimensions are the ones that need to be changed. So it's, yeah, diameter. This side dimension doesn't really actually matter that much because we're going to resize it probably anyway. So once you've done that, we are then going to bounding box select both objects, and then we are going to align them. And in this case, we want all 3 center nodes to be aligned so that that original cylinder hole is floating directly in the center of this sphere hole. Okay. So now we're going to add another object, a box hole, also to this object. And we want to do the same thing, aligning all these objects the way that we just did. Center, center, oops, and center. So all 3 center nodes are aligned. Okay, so let's now navigate to the front view with this navigational cube. And then if your screen looks like mine, where it's kind of a weird perspective, try hitting this switch to flat view. So that basically flattens this perspective so that it's more like a sketch. So the next thing that we're going to be doing is creating, so this box right here is ultimately going to cut the top surface of our signet ring, giving us that top plane that you would then add an engraving or add some design elements to. So we have to really position that into where we think it's going to be, and we have the freedom of changing it at any time. So watch along. So what we're going to be doing is raising this box up. And I'm just going to go ahead and widen it. Just make it plenty wide to make sure that I'm cutting everything out and kind of get it out of the way. So then now where you have to make your sort of first aesthetic decision. So like I said before, this sphere hole is going to be essentially the body of the ring, the actual ring itself. So because a signet ring is sort of like a rounded dome with the top of the head cut right off, that's a graphic image. We need to drag we need to sort of reproportion this or change the shape of this. So to do that, I'm going to grab this hollow box and I'm going to drag it up so it looks more like an egg right now. So what I'm looking for at this point is I'm looking for this intersection right here. Everything that intersects is going to get cut away. So all of this dark gray area right there is going to get chopped off by this object. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind as you're in, just sort of like look at how wide this is. I might actually lower mine a little bit just because it was really wide. If you feel like as you're dragging this, it's moving in too large of steps, you can change snap grid down to be smaller. Right now, every movement that you made was 1 millimeter increments. You can go down to 0.25 and you can have a smoother sort of motion and get a little more fine-tuned with your modifications. So let's go ahead and do that and then navigate now to the right side view of the navigational cube, staying in that flat view. So remember how I said that this width didn't really matter of this sphere. It's because we're going to resize it. So now what we're doing is we're determining, you can see now this box is going to cut off this top. So you're now determining what that top side view width is going to be of that top surface. And so you might just want to decrease this a little bit. And again, I realize that this looks nothing like a ring at this point. It will once it comes together and you'll start to see how this is forming. So just use your arrows to move that sphere, that if you resized it, back to the center, but we're going to align everything later. So really just kind of get it eyeballed right now. So as a little check, what we're going to do is, change the sphere back into a solid. ultimately going to be a solid. And now you can see exactly what the profile of that top surface will look like. So if you're like, whoa, I don't like that shape, it's way too big, now is your time to modify that because we're only going to be building from this point onward. Okay, so once you're happy, you're going to use the align tool, but be careful, only align this side center point. This is align. This is I have alignment in this center point as well, but that's totally coincidental. That's based on this box happening to be perfectly centered. You likely don't have. This is likely black on your screen, and that's fine. It's fine if it's gray, but all I'm really concerned is that this node on the side is gray, and that's essentially lining up central points right here along this axis. Okay. So once you've done that, we're going to single select just the sphere, which is now solid. We're going to select the box hole, and we're going to group them right up here. And when you group them, you now have the sort of basic shape of your ring starting to take form. This top is set now. Nothing is going to change about that. So if you don't like the shape or the size of yours, now is the time to pause and then revise that in some way or another. Okay, so for our sake of visibility, we're going to change our ring body sphere back into a hole temporarily. Okay, so now to start to shape the side. So you can kind of see how this is taking shape, right? Like you can see that this is the general shape of the top here. There's your ring band right there. But we need to now cut out all of this area. So to do that, we're using two objects. The first one is going to be a box hole that we're adding to the work plane in front, so closer to you than, so like in this position. And then we are now going to navigate back to that right side view. So I'm going to scroll in. We're going to use arrows to move this box hole into position. So what is the position? The position is I want this edge of the box hole and this edge of the cylinder hole to be pretty much right aligned. It's fine if it's not perfect. You could, if you want to get really picky, you could change that increment down and get like really spot on. You also want to move this box hole down, just start with it like roughly the top edge, roughly halfway, like half at the center point. You can move all of this again, and you likely will. Okay. So now a new tool that we have not used at all, work plane. So this right now is the work plane. It's like the ground in your three-dimensional room that we're in. We have the option of temporarily relocating the work plane. And so you notice that like when you drop an object onto the work plane, gravity takes a hold and it pulls it to the ground. Well, if you don't want it to fall to the ground, but you want it to fall to another object, you grab the work plane and you basically, my hands are free. I'm just basically, it's glued itself to my cursor and I'm now just moving around and you can see that it's snapping. It's snapping to all these surfaces. So I want to snap it to the top of my box hole. And now what has happened is the work plane is on top of the box. So I want to now add a round roof. Just generally place it at the center of the box. And you can see that it's now sitting on the box hole. So go ahead and grab your work plane and then just move it somewhere else and it snaps back to normal. And now we've repositioned, we've got our round roof on the top of the box. So the first step we want to do is rotate this 90 degrees in this orientation. So the hole is the arc of the half circle is facing the sides. And we want to select these two objects and align them so that only our tops, let's see here. It's a little weird. It's a little weird how that did that, but you want to basically align these top points. And the default sizes of the round roof and the box hole are the same. So we haven't resized either of those objects yet, but you should see all these grade nodes show up. So 3 grade nodes here, 3 grade nodes here. You don't have to worry about these. In fact, don't touch those because it throws off the alignment. Okay, so we are now going to navigate back to that right side view. So here's where things get a little tricky. So I can see right now that this distance has increased. I'm going to select both of these objects and use my arrows again to just realign to my side, to my cylinder right there. So what I want to show you, I'm actually just going to turn this to a solid just so that we have the contrast, just so you can see this. Oh, that's kind of awkward, isn't it? Let me just move this forward. Okay. So what we're doing is these two objects are eventually going to cut away everything right here, all of this material. And this is now leaving us with the shape, the side view of our signet ring. So if you feel like you want this curvature to be much stronger, much shallower, a much shallower arc, you need to do that, right? If you feel like you want this to be, make sure you're always moving these two objects together. But if you feel like you want this to be a super sharp transition, right there, super sharp, then make the roof shorter. So this is where you have to really decide for yourself what you want this to look like. What I will point out though, this is very, very critical. So let's just put these back to a hole so that we can see. So all of this area is getting cut away. Here's what I need you to pay attention to though. This intersection point right here where this line intersects with this line, so right there, this point needs to be at the same level as this edge or higher, because ultimately we're going to use this inner shape to cut everything away. And if this point is lower, you're going to end up cutting into, you're going to have like this like notch taken out. So ideally, it's very clean to have this point, very lined up here, or above it. Just don't drop below it. And you'll see if you do it, because it'll look very strange when you group all this together. So I just want to kind of point that out. That point and that line need to be even, or the point needs to be above the line. Okay, so we are then going to select our round roof, select our box. These should both be a hole at this point. So just click the hole button. We're now going to group them so they become one object. And now just navigate out here. Make sure that this is plenty wide to cut cleanly through everything, through the sphere. I'm sorry, we got to duplicate that. So go to the right side view. Now that you're happy with this, we're going to duplicate this. We are now going to move it over to the other side. And we're basically aligning it to the opposite side of that hole. And so this object in the center has really acted as a guide the entire time. This is the 3mm wall thickness we want, and so we're using it to align these little toast shape objects to it. So once we've done that, we can change the sphere back into a solid, and you can really now see what that shape is going to look like. You can see all this dark area is going to get cut away. So we're going to select the sphere. We're going to select both of these cutters, and we're going to group all of it. So that is your ring shape itself. If you wanted to, if you're like, I want more of a refined signet ring, you could also cut away areas like this. And that kind of, let me just show you a quick demo of what that could look like. So, and this is me just giving you an option. Certainly it's not necessary if you're like, what is she doing? But if you wanted, you could then be like positioning a shape in here to cut away to further shape all this. I would probably, if I was going to do this, I would probably use like scribble to create what this cutter shape is, because you can see there's like this very awkward like notch right there. So not so cute, but this is certainly perfectly satisfactory as a basic signet ring. So the last thing we need to do is just find that cutter on the inside. That's our ring shape. I can kind of see it shadowing here. If you can't grab it, just grab and move your ring out of the way. At this point, we can resize this to be much wider because all we're doing is cutting the hole. We've already defined the wall thickness right here. So if you did move it, use the align tool and just align only that node right there. Don't touch the other ones. And then just use your arrows, move it back over, make sure it's colliding cleanly through. So see how when I had said to make sure that that intersection point was above or even with the top edge, this is why. If you had made that intersection point lower, you would be taking a chunk out of this right there, and it would look really weird. So group all of that together, and now you have your finished ring right there. So from here, if you want to take the very classical approach to a signet ring, you can navigate to the top view, use Scribble, and then with Scribble, you can create your own scribble shape, whatever that weird shape is. This has got very strange very quickly. Really just not sure what I'm doing here, just demonstrating something very odd. I don't know what that is. You could also do your name, for example. And at this point, so if you want to get it back on the work plane, so you can actually put the work plane on top of your signet. You can cut this, and then if you paste it, it will paste on top, and then drop your work plane back over there. So then top view. This is my new brand logo, apparently. Align it. Set the depth. In this case, I would recommend engravings be like 0.5 to 1 millimeter. If it gets deeper than 1 millimeter, it doesn't always have success. So reset that. And look, at this point, you have the option of making this a raised detail, or if you want this to be a cutout in the traditional method, you would align the tops. And then you would turn that to be a hole, and then you would group them together, and you've cut it out. So, yep, so that's a very odd little design up there. So that is essentially your signet ring. So at this point, you've got a finished ring. You can export it and then take it to Shapeways for fabrication. One thing I will mention about if you do decide to make this in brass or bronze or silver or some metal, when you load this into Shapeways, it will show you the price that you can expect. What I would just give you some guidance here, depending on how chunky this area is up here, you have the option of hollowing this out and like really just adding a shape in there and cutting material away. That will dramatically reduce the cost of this piece, like potentially like 20 to 30% cost reduction. So just keep that in mind if you want something, if you think that there's like a lot of material in here and you could be fine hollowing it out, which you really won't see that when you're wearing it. Most traditionally made signet rings are hollowed out. So I would just say keep that in mind because that is a big, bulky chunk of metal in there, and you're paying for all that metal in there. So yeah, so that's a signet ring. If you do decide to fabricate through Shapeways, definitely check out my video on this channel that shows you, like walks you through the Shapeways process in case you're new to digital fabrication. And I do have a discount code for 15% off your first order. So you're welcome to use that as well. So yeah, so thank you for joining me and happy modeling. Bye.